Hello there, welcome to Doctor Who Radio Show. I'm That's The Way It Goes 09, better known as Dave, and this is...
The other Tim.
Brian.
Both from America, so it's an international over the sea and over here perspective. So, taking on another thing that I was thinking about earlier, recently Stephen Moffat has said that Lady Covarian, featured in Matt Smith's second season and appearing full time in the story, the two-part end to his second series as Doctor Who, might be returning. And then in this new to be seen season we have Madame Phlox, played by the actress Hawes, who was in Ashes to Ashes, both sort of time-lordy Rani characters. And we also have the fact that the Time Lords basically did what they did in the Three Doctors, giving the Doctor back something that he'd lost. In the Three Doctors it was the knowledge of space-time travel, and in Time of the Doctor it was a new life cycle. So these little hints over the last 7 years, do they suggest that in season 8, along with the idea that the Master might possibly be returning, perhaps even in a new form, do you think, both of you, Tim and Brian, that suggests that the Time Lords are being reintroduced as characters, just like they were, appearing every now and again in the classic series?
Well, I think they were reintroduced. They were brought back in the end of time, first of all, as villains, pretty much. And then they were brought back in the 50th anniversary special in a bigger way. I mean, in fact, they were saved by the Doctors. So, whether or not they're going to revisit them or in this next season is anybody's guess. But, I mean, the thing is, the idea of revisiting Gallifrey or the Time Lords is there now. It's possible. In other words, the time war that destroyed them has been reversed. So they could come back at any time, whether or not as good guys or as bad guys, it remains to be seen. But they did help him out in the time of the Doctor. They just gave him a new lease on life, so to speak. So
yeah, I don't think it was the Time Lords that gave him the regenerations.
Of course it was. Who else could it have been?
I think it was the Master.
No, the Master doesn't have that kind of power.
Why do you think it might be the Master and not his Time Lord peers?
Well, the Master went back with the Time Lords at the end of time.
Did he?
Yeah. He went back on Gallifrey, and it looked like he was killing Rassilon, so...
yeah, that's a good point. That is actually true. He did get sort of sucked into whatever void the Time Lords had been with. The only snag is, these are different Time Lords.
Well, the way I got it was that they owed him a favor, since he had kind of saved their bacon in the previous special. You know, he wrapped up the Time War, got rid of the Daleks, and pocketed away the Time Lords and Gallifrey. So that's why in Time the Doctor, they kind of owed him a favor. And when Clara begged them, hey, do something, you owe him one, pretty much, they did. I mean, it doesn't stand to reason that the Master would ever want them to have another lease on life. I can't see that being, unless until the Time Lords now think they could return as villains. They think, well, you owe us now something big since we saved you, so they could interfere with it.
I mean, the Master is like the fact he is the Doctor's equal in a sense, so it kind of would make sense that the Master would give a whole new cycle for the Doctor.
The master himself couldn't even do that. He had to steal bodies to continue. That happened in two particular occasions. He actually stole someone else's body just to continue living.
Yeah, but Time Lord, like this whole cycle of it has advanced, how it has evolved and everything. They even said it in the sequel of Armageddon's.
It does seem, though, really, that he deserved it. I mean, let's face it, it's a big birthday present, as well as a very good plot device to continue the series. I get the feeling that the Time Lords that we see, at least in David Doctor,
and if you notice, like in the
goody
anniversary, if you notice in the 50th anniversary, they said that they have an emergency meeting.
That's because they were being destroyed.
Because the plans failed. That what happened in the end of time.
Yeah.
So is it very likely, as well as the fact that he's had a new life cycle given to him, and is it likely, in addition to that, we have the fact that his memory of destroying Gallifrey is completely false. Therefore, he might have been, walking through entire plots devised by renegade Time Lords, whether it's, the Master Rani or whatever. It could have been other ones as well, perhaps. Is it possible that, he might have unwittingly been near a scheme by one of his old, Time Lord fellow renegade villains?
Well, what is the question? I mean, is it likely that what?
Since the Doctor has been given an entirely new life cycle, and also has discovered that his previous memory of destroying Gallifrey was actually false, and given by his own future self, in fact.
Yeah.
Does that mean, do you think, that certain instances in the last 7 years could have been, schemes, or due to Time Lords, renegade villain Time Lords, or the Time Lords themselves, which he wouldn't think they were, because as far as he was aware, Gallifrey and everything connected to it was, kaput.
Well, it could be, but I don't think, I mean, it would depend on what you were talking about, really. I mean, I don't see that there's any question that for the first 7 years of the program as it came back, as far as we were concerned, as far as the Doctor was concerned, the Time Lords were gone. There was nothing he could do about it. It was only when he managed to get together with his two prior selves in the 50th anniversary special that they concocted a way to reverse that and save the Time Lords from extinction. So I think it's really more looking ahead now. It depends on what kind of arc they have planned for Mr. Capaldi. We have to see what they're going to do, but whether or not there's going to be an ongoing arc or something involving his actions with Time Lords, or whether or not he encounters them at all, whether or not that's just because whether or not he's going to encounter them at all. We don't know yet. We have to see where they're going with it. But I'm guessing there's some kind of thread that's going to be through there involving Time Point.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We might not have, a physical...
But I think they're more forward-looking than that. I don't think they're going to try and address any of the past episodes and say, hey, that was Time Lords, or hey, that was so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. So.
What do you think, Brian?
I don't know. I mean, it just be. I guess it's just like it'll be like what they have in store for Capaldi, like with the writers and everything. So who knows what they'll have.
It's a very good string in the arrow because it does free up the writers to include more Time Lordy type stuff. I mean, we've had a few instances with, you know, the arch, you know, the time arch, you know, from the end of time. That's supposed to be Gallifreyan technology. And even in the classic series, you know, the Mordrin and Dead villains who had stolen Time Lord regeneration technology.
And they brought back the Sisterhood, which is also related to Time Lord somewhat.
Ah, yeah. So in the same way that Russell T Davies left a few sort of things which weren't, you know, confirmed in continuity for other producers to use, which Moffat has and hasn't sort of used very well on occasion.
Well, I thought that was brilliant that, you know, a throwaway line in the end of time ended up being a major plot device for the 50th century at the moment. I mean, and I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was brilliant that they brought Billy Piper back, not as Rose Tyler, but as this device. Which I thought that was perfect. I mean, that was awesome.
And even more clever was the idea that it was essentially a, you know, atomic bomb, if you like, which has its own sort of fail-safe, which is a conscience.
A conscience, which can talk the user out of using it. That was great.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So it's possible to take a small throwaway line, like they do in fandom, you know, Doctor Who fandom or Star Trek fandom, and make entire stories around it. And that was really generous of Russell T Davies. He left several things, like the moment, things which I'm guessing were just literally never meant to be serious at all. They were just, you know...
True of the whole series. That's true of the classic series as well, because a throwaway line in The Deadly Assassin led to the whole regeneration crisis years later. The fact that they mentioned in The Deadly Assassin, which was a throwaway line, you can only regenerate 12 times, ended up becoming part of the mythology of the show, so that, you know, 30 some odd years later, the showrunner has to come up with a plan to ensure that the Doctor has a continued lifespan because he's reached his 12th one. So that just goes to show the power of throwaway lines right there. Not to mention all the other mythology that was cooked up just in that one story, Rassilon and the Key, the Great Sash, and all that stuff. You know, it's amazing that you know, they ran with those throwaway lines and made up a whole Time Lord mythology about it.
I think that's what I liked about Russell T Davies. He did have a lovely sort of fandom type, childlike imagination where, you know, just like fans, you'd sort of imagine fantastic things which might be a big part or a small part, like, you know, the King of the Neverwheres or whatever it is, you know, which sounds like Roald Dahl type speech.
Well, that's the great thing about when it came back when it did in 2005, or actually 2003 is when they started working on it, but that it was brought back by fans of the show that knew what would work and what wouldn't work, and brought it back in such a big and successful way that here we are, you know, 8 years later, and it's the biggest import from the UK there is. I mean, it's a worldwide success. So, you know, good on them. You know, they know what they're doing. They're fans of the show, and they make a good proper Doctor Who. They don't try to. I mean, they do try to Americanize it somewhat, I guess, a little bit. But in other words, they don't pander to the fans. They make a good show.
Yeah, that's true. Because when they tried to do that, it produced a rather sort of half and half.
You're talking about the 80s, right?
The 1990 TV movie.
Oh, the movie, yeah.
Where, oh dear, at the start of that, they went about it all the wrong way. They literally bombarded viewers, whether they're fans or not, with a Time Lord can only regenerate 12 times.
Why, when I first saw Rose, when it came back in 05, I didn't get to see it until about early 06, but the very first episode, I said, see, they got it right. They didn't waste any time trying to bring back a prior actor and have him regenerate and trying to explain all that nonsense. No. The girl just runs into the Doctor and he grabs her hand and says, run. and that's how they did it. That's why it worked. I mean, that's a brilliant opening. That's a perfect way to bring it back. You don't have to explain anything. He's a doctor. He's got a time machine. Blah blah blah. That's it. It's all seen through the audience, and that's why it works. Because she is, in that occasion, the audience figure.
It's just like how the Doctor was introduced.
I kind of thought
in Unearthly
the first few episodes of season 1 weren't really that great.
So
well, you're not looking at it from an old fans perspective, I guess. That's you're looking at it as a modern person. I mean, my point is for a new audience, that was a good way to bring it back. You don't have to have it explained to you who or what he is, because he's going to do that eventually anyway. I mean, the point is, compared to the TV movie from '96, they spend half the movie having him, get shot, regenerate, and it's good for fans, but it wasn't a good way to introduce the show to a new audience. I'm guessing that's what David was trying to say, right?
Yeah, in a nutshell. I mean, like I was saying, Unearthly Child is virtually the same thing that they did in Rose. They didn't, bombard people with lots and lots of... They had some sort of references, but very sort of in the background references, which is how you should do it, really. Because then it operates on two narratives. One, it won't be confusing for, casual viewers, but for long-term viewers, they will see an extra layer to what the person's trying to say in the story. Yeah,
because throughout the course of that first episode, he does explain who he is and where he's from, I believe. Because he has to tell her, who he is and where he's from. But, in other words, but they don't let all that exposition get in the way of a good story, which is basically the return of the Auton, right? Or the Nestine consciousness or whatever. So
yeah, the plastic creatures.
Yeah,
so they could bring back.
It was a great beginning to a new Doctor Who. I think. I mean, I think it works. It did what it had to do, and it didn't try to do what the movie did. Which, in other words, they learned the mistakes of the TV movie on how to bring Doctor Who back.
Oh yeah, that had some absolutely wonderful flourishes, but it was perhaps a little bit too bogged down, really, I suppose. Having a good nearly 20 years of being on hiatus as a proper full series was a good thing, because in a way it meant you could literally not have to worry about fan continuity. I think if they just brought it back as the series that they'd left with in the first place, I don't think it would have perhaps been as successful as it should have been.
No, I don't think so either.
Because it wouldn't have allowed new fans to discover the magic of Doctor Who for themselves in precisely the same way that every single new era of Doctor Who is presented. Every single new Doctor has been quite simply a reboot, from scratch. I mean, that's the whole point of the Doctor regenerated. Everything is totally different about them.
That's why it lasted 50 years too, because it's always a new thing in a way.
So,
I mean, you keep
working on that premise, they could easily reintroduce, say, the meddling monk or the Rani in precisely the same sort of, less is more type way.
Yeah, they could.
And all it takes, really, is, just a brilliant sort of actor to bring the character back, The same master, just a different emphasis, type thing.
Well, according to Stephen Moffat, he's always asked, like, why don't you bring back so-and-so, or why don't you do this? And he says, well, if there's a good story to be had out of it, then I'll do it. Like Mark Gatiss had to talk him into bringing back the Ice Warriors, because Moffat said, well, why? What are you going to do with them? And so when he said, okay, I'm going to make it, on a submarine in the Cold War, blah, blah, blah. Then he said, okay, you write it, we'll do it. But I mean, in other words, it doesn't bring back characters just to be And I agree with him. That should be the case.
I thought Cold War was rather good for new viewers. You know, it was jam-packed with a few sort of past references, but I think the Ice Warrior made a good impression. And bizarrely enough, new series fans did actually know who the Ice Warriors were. Because the great thing about Doctor Who or Star Trek or any long-run classic thing, you know, or comics, is that if you become a new fan of something, you'll have interest in what's gone before, and you'll, you know, expand your knowledge and your entertainment value. So, you know, some of them would have presumably watched The Seeds of Death and, you know, got all the references.
Yeah. That's the great thing about Doctor Who, is that you can join any time, but you've got a history to go back and look at if you want to. That's how we've all done it. In fact, I mean, because we're all younger than the show. When I first caught the show back in like 79 or 80, I had no idea that there were 3 previous Doctors. I was watching Tom Baker, but I immediately started, you know, looking for the books to read, and you know, then you find out, it started in 63, the 204th Doctor, and there's soon to be another one at that time, because Tom Baker was about to leave. But that's the great thing. When you join Doctor Who, when you start watching Doctor Who, you've got a whole history to go back and look at if you want to. Especially now, like somebody Brian's age, he started watching it. I don't know when, but
I started watching it when they add the episode over by me, Garden of the Ways.
Okay. So I mean, my point is though that as a new Doctor Who fan, you've got, you know, 40-odd years of you can go back and 50 years to go back and look at anything that you want to from before. For example, you're interested in watching the Delgado Massacre. Now you can do that. I mean, that's the cool thing about Doctor Who. It's got such a rich history that you can go back and look at.
I think
exactly like when it went on break.
Here's a good question for you, Brian. Going back to your point about first watching it in parting of, you know, the parting of the waves, you saw the regeneration. What was that like for you as a new series and, well, a new viewer, I suppose, of Doctor Who?
I loved it. I mean, I loved the episode, and when I first saw Regenerate, I was like, this is something different. This is something like a whole different type of sci-fi TV show I'm watching here.
Sort of different from seeing Star Trek or something.
Yeah.
So at the time you saw that, you didn't know that the Doctor had many faces and changed whenever he needed to?
Nope.
So how did you come to learn about the whole thing? I mean, did you look it up on Wikipedia, or did you? I mean, how did you get educated on how the Doctor operates like that? You just continued watching it. You saw him as in it or something, or?
Well, when it went on, like when that season 1 finale ended and went on break until it came back on, I went back and went watching couple of the classic episodes, and then I got my whole I got what the whole Doctor Who thing was about and everything. So, like my first story of the classic ones was Genesis of the Daleks.
That's a good one.
And then after that was the very first episode of William Hartnell.
Unearthly Child.
Yeah.
Cool.
The irony is, that's basically what I did as well. I mean, when I was watching it was the end of the 80s. You know, Sylvester McCoy was my first proper Doctor. I've seen the 5th and 6th Doctor. But I, you know, watched those same sort of stories on VHS, you know, Genesis and Unearthly Child, and, you know, John Pertwee ones, you know, like Day of the Daleks, absolutely brilliant, classic, and also Death to the Daleks. Bless you. That's a sneeze on the nose.
Bless you. Well, that was the point, wasn't it? The great thing about Doctor Who is whatever time you come into it, you've got so much you can go back and view, or read, or it's got such a long history. I mean, plus it's all over the place. You've got Doctor Who books, audio stories, all the DVD range, which is nearly complete, I guess, until they find some more episodes. It's huge. I mean, there's so much of it, which is
it's impossible to even sort of categorize it all. I mean, the Big Finish audios themselves, there must be 200 of them now.
Yeah, more than. There's they're about to reach 200 on the main range, but then they've also got all the little side ranges they've got. They've got a whole thing on Gallifrey with Ramonda. They've got it's just countless. I mean, it's amazing. Amazingly successful.
I mean, that's literally a fandom, ultimate fandom company.
Yeah. But again, it's an occasion where it's the fans that have taken charge of the show. The old fans of the show are now running it, and that's awesome. I mean, that's great. I mean, the show is in good hands now. Because the BBC, for years, were trying to think, should we bring it back? How do we bring it back? I mean, we tried a movie, it didn't really work. So what it took was some fans, saying, hey, we can make this show now. We can make it. Russell T Davies, we can do this. And they did it. And look where we are now. It's great. It's great to be a Doctor Who fan now, too. You don't have to be, shy or embarrassed about it, because it's no longer just nerdy. I mean, it's cool. Back in the day, I mean, people were bullied for being Doctor Who fans. I think. I mean, I've heard of cases where that was the case. Or Star Trek fans or whatever. And now, if you like Doctor Who, you're cool. You're in the cool crowd.
I think I can relate to that. I mean,
yeah.
It wasn't really cool near the end of the 80s. Sorry, go on, Ryan.
Although, it is a little difficult to find, people that like Doctor Who, at least for me around here.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you could say that wherever you're at, I think. I mean, it's not, I guess, I don't know, I mean, you find them here, on YouTube. We have 3 or 4 different groups here. We're on the Doctor Who radio show, where we're a group of Doctor Who fans talking, and one's in Texas, one's in New York, and one's in the UK. So, I mean, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, though, they have actually brought the Master back in Big Finish, because there's
several.
Dark Eyes 1 and 2, that features the Master.
Yeah, it's introduced a new one, I believe, according to Graham. I haven't listened to it, but and then they've also had the Joffrey Beaver's Master quite a bit. In fact, he was the villain in their 50th anniversary story, The Light at the End.
Yeah, he's appeared with Tom Baker's Doctor as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
And the one in Dark Eyes is the first time the 8th Doctor's encountered the Master since the TV movie.
Cool.
Far more modern and far more down to earth, really. I suppose inspired by John Sims' Master, but I'm quite sure there's plenty of times, there's plenty of Jubilee was what Dalek was based on. That's a Big Finish audio. And I think there's probably other examples where the audios or elements have been sort of adapted or inspired.
Definitely.
Doctor Who.
The one, the 2-parter with David Tennant, what's it called? Family of Blood? Or that's based on a not on a Big Finish. It's based on a
Sylvester McCoy novel.
The Virgin novel, a Virgin Books novel.
Human Nature.
Human Nature, that's the one.
Essentially the same plot, except, oddly enough, you got one Scottish Doctor being replaced by another Scottish Doctor who does
who's not allowed to talk in a Scottish accent.
No, and that is actually one of Tennant's best two-part stories. It's absolutely brilliant.
Definitely. Yeah, it is. Awesome.
So you can, that was, nobody needed to know about that two-part story being a book, because it was such, that's the key really. More is less. I mean, less is more, or both ways around really.
Mm-hmm.
And if something is presented properly, it's like Game of Thrones or whatever, you can just dip into the show any time you want to, and it won't make any difference whether you're a complete noob or an absolute fanatic.
Yeah.
So, any last words, Brian, at all? How would you like to see the Master or the Rani brought back if they do come back in season 8?
If they bring back either the Master or the Rani, just hope it's in a really awesome way, and I'd like to see John Sims' regeneration, if they do.
Ooh. Ah, that'd be interesting. John Sims. How do you think John Sims' Master would regenerate though, would you think?
Can he regenerate anymore? Or was he given a new set of lives?
Yeah, he was. The Time Lord resurrected him.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, that's a good point actually.
They
I suppose technically he's on his
15th.
I mean, if he's been resurrected from Sir Derek Jacobi, then logically he's basically at his Patrick Troughton stage.
Yeah, the Time Lord resurrected him because of the Time War and everything. So,
I just wonder how they'd write him out yet. Do you think he'd get sort of killed in the middle of a plan gone wrong?
I don't think they'll ever kill him. He's the Doctor's Moriarty. That's why he's created. I mean, to be the equal and opposite of the Doctor, sort of. So the Master will always be around. It just depends on, like I said, if they have a good storyline to bring him in and use him. I don't care if we see him regenerate or not. I'd like to see him. I think they should have kept Jacobi around as the Master for longer than they did. He was brilliant. I mean, he would have been great, but they wanted Sim for whatever reason, and he was good. But I'd like to see somebody, since the Doctor is Capaldi now, who's in his 50s. I'd like to see an older Master face off with him, not a young Sim Master.
Jeremy Irons, perhaps, or something like that.
Or Charles Dance would be brilliant.
yeah, I could see Charles Dance as the Master.
Oh, just imagine them two, everyone, just sparring against each other in the scene. You can just imagine the sort of, I don't know, sarcasm of Capaldi and Dance's sort of droll, sort of nefarious planning as he's talking.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
Well, bloody hell. That would be good. And if they bring back the Rani instead, who do you think should play the Rani, and how should it be played? Because the Rani is a very modern character.
I don't think they will, unless because I believe the creators of the Rani are sitting on that, and they're probably not allowing them to use the character. I'm not sure. That could just be rumor, but they are. The character is owned by the pair of writers that wrote, in the 80s, her two stories. So they'd have to get permission to use the character. As far as an actress or player, I mean, it's anybody's guess, But hopefully, I guess it depends on who the Doctor is. I guess it would be an older type to go against Capaldi. If it was say a Smith type Doctor or a Tennant type Doctor, then you have somebody young and gorgeous.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that might work actually. A sort of young and gorgeous Rani who makes up for her new regenerated looks, good looks, you know, with a high intelligence, just like the late Kate O'Mara. But I've always thought Rani was very modern. She would fit in perfectly in the new Doctor Who series, oddly enough.
Yeah.
She was created near the end of Doctor Who. She wasn't like the Master, you know, created in the, sexist 70s. She was more of a sort of feminist, animal rights activist. She would go down very well with the sort of progressive feminist type thing or something, I don't know. But she is very much like, she's not like the Master. She has a conscience of sorts.
She's not evil like the Master, but she has no conscience when it comes to what she does. I mean, she doesn't care who she hurts to get the what she needs or whatever, for her experiments or whatever. She doesn't deliberately set out to do evil, but she doesn't care about who gets hurt with her experiments, pretty much, right?
Her morality sort of back to front, really.
Maybe.
Oddly enough, I think she would have been perfect going up against the Third Doctor, because in some respects they're both sort of moralistic and willing to stand up to people.
Well, perhaps this Delphox character, maybe Keely Hawes is actually the Rani. We don't know yet. I mean, maybe that would be interesting.
Well, Matrix Law 212 did say that Madame Kaveri is basically an allogram, making a reference to the Rani or something like that. So maybe the two characters, Kaverian and Delphox, are one and the same.
I don't know. I think Kaverian's done. I think that all of the things that were introduced in the last 3 seasons with Matt Smith, I think, are tied up now and forward. I don't think they're going to address that. In spite of what Moffat said in that article, I think he was just throwing that out there because he likes to do that. He never confirms or denies anything. So if somebody asking, if somebody's asking, is Kaverian coming back, he's going to say maybe. So that's where we are with that. But I think
non-committal sort of answer.
Yeah.
Yes, not no.
And I think all of those plot threads with the Smith Doctor are tied up, and they're ready to go forward with the Capaldi Doctor, and who knows what kind of journey they're going to want, what kind of arc they're going to have planned for him. But I think it's going to be all new. I could be entirely wrong though. But I think we're done with the cracks. We're done with the silence. We're done with the what are they? The church or whatever with Kavorian. I think all those things are done. It's time to look ahead.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll be the end of all this sort of every companion has to show off their blooming family. Like that. Yeah, the scenes in Matt Smith's last story, you know, just in there almost for the sake of it.
Well, I think that was to show that from Clara's point of view, it all happened in one day. She watched her best friend age to death. You know, so yeah, I mean, they didn't really have to have the family bit, but he had to drop her off somewhere. He kept sending her back twice. He did. So from her point of view, she watched her best friend age and die. You know, just in a day on Christmas.
It's a lovely Christmas present.
Yeah, terrible. I guess the reason they had her family in there was just so there was some place for her to go when he sent her back, because he did send her away twice.
Merry Christmas, everyone. We're going to kill off your favourite Doctor. That was sarcastic. That's from new series fans as well. So yeah, they do get the cynicism towards the BBC. But I'm afraid that's all the time we have for Doctor Who radio show. But I have been That's the Way It Goes, better known as Dave. And these lovely, wonderful chats with me have been
Other Tim
and Ryan.
And until next time, keep tuned.